Hi, in this video I'm going to show you how you can create a flow, what will be executed on MiNiFi agent, how you can publish the flow and check its state, and how you can send data to NIFI. Let's start with the designer view. In the first column, you can check the status of the flow, so whether it's modified in the last publish or not. In the next, you can see the agent class where this flow will be published, and in the last two columns you can check the version and the date when the publish happened. These are empty for me because this is a brand new EFM installation on my machine. Let's go to the canvas. Here you can see three different components that you can use during the flow creation. The first one is the processors. Processor is the component that is used to listen for incoming data. You can pull data from external sources, publish data to the external sources, and also route, transform, or extract information from flow files. The next one is the remote processor group, is the ability to send flow files between different NiFi instances as site to site. I would like to highlight one of the major differences between NiFi and EFM here. There is no processor group concept in EFM because the flow hierarchy is flat. Funnel is a component that is used to combine data from several connections into a single connection. In the bottom section, you can create services. Let's create one, a standard SSL context service. And in this service, you can define the most common settings for your security settings like passwords, key store files, and so on. And after that, we can go back to the canvas. Let's pick post HTTP processor, and in the configuration of the processor, you can open with a double click. In the component specific section, you can see that you can use a SSL context service, and let's double click on the value, and in the drop down, the service what we have created is available, so we can reuse the same security settings for multiple processors easily. Let's delete this processor because we don't need it anymore, and let's move on to parameters. In the parameters, you can create key value pairs and reuse for settings in processors. Let's create two parameters. You also can define parameter as empty string and also mark as sensitive value. In this case, that will trigger additional validation on different phases of the evaluation, so we'll protect the sensitive information. And let's correct it one. And let's create another one. And as I mentioned, let's create a flow what will send data from edge to NiFi. First, we need to define a processor what will create data for us. I will use generate flow file processor, and I will do some configuration. So in the upper section, in the most common processor settings, the crucial part for this demo is run schedule. I set it to 5 seconds. That means this processor will create a text file each and every 5 seconds. And in the bottom section, I will define the content of the files. I double click on the value, and in the pop-up, here is these two icons where you can see whether the property is ready to handle expression language or related values and parameter values. Let's use the parameter what we just defined, and with Control plus space you can get an auto suggest feature. Let's pick the first parameter, and let's close the expression, click OK, and apply. And in order to make available and send the data to NiFi, we have to add the remote processor group, but NiFi URL is a mandatory settings for a remote processor group. This settings is basically the NiFi URL and port. So I add to the input box and create the remote processor group. In this case, it's important to define the proper transport protocol, and for my demo is HTTP is the right one. And let's create the connection between my processor and the remote processor group. And this connection requires the input port ID. For this information, we need to go to the NiFi tab, and NiFi can receive data from outside via this input port component. So I had to create one. In order to visualize the receiving data, I create a processor group. And I have to add also an input port inside the processor group so I can create the connection between the top-level input port and the processor group on the NiFi side. With this breadcrumb in the bottom left section, you can navigate through the hierarchy of the NiFi flow. And let's create the connection. And let's start the input port so it starts receiving, ready to receive data from outside. And let's copy the ID of this input port because this is the missing piece on EFM side. Let's click on add, and we have the valid flow. In order to send this flow definition to the agent and start the execution, I need to publish, and I can do this inside action menu and click on publish. You can also add the comment, what is this change all about, but in this demo is not necessary, so I just leave it empty. The publish was success, as you can see in the pop-up menu. We also can check the events, what happened under the hood. If I go to the Edge Events view, you can see it started with a bulk operation. An update configuration event has been created. We went through all the major statuses like queued, deployed, and finally done. And if I go back to NiFi, here you can see in the connection, as there is no downstream processor in the processor group, the events are queued up in the relation, and we can check the content of those flow files in the data provenance menu. Let's check the last one, the content, and here you can see the parent value is inside the received data. So basically, that's all how you can set up a flow from Edge to NiFi. And one final thought, what I would like to highlight is that one of the major difference between NiFi editor or canvas and flow creation and EFM is that in NiFi, you can see real time how the data in motion and start transforming and queued up, like we can see here in the relation. On the other hand, in EFM, this is in the canvas, basically you can define a kind of blueprint of the flow, and it is published on the agent side and executed on the agent. So that's why we can't see the different stages and the processing phases inside EFM. So in a nutshell, on EFM side, the UI is static. There is no live feedback about processing details as the flow is distributed to and executed on many MiNiFi agents. However, for NiFi on the UI, you will see constantly updated information as it is tied to one runtime. That was all I wanted to show you about flow creation. Thank you.